Good morning, guys. My name is Vanessa Laughlin. I am the softball channel manager for Blast Motion. This is my co-host, Daniel Nicolaisen. He's the former hitting coach for Seton Hall, and just recently took a really great opportunity with the St. Louis Cardinals. So we're super excited for him in that journey.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're here today to talk about the short but eventful history that is Blast softball so far, and its practical application. But before we kind of get into some of that, I wanted to take a few minutes to give you some background on myself. I think it's always kind of cool to know how somebody gets to be on the stage and talk to you guys. And so my history started as a kid in San Diego playing baseball with my brother. He was 5 years older than me. He was bigger, he was stronger, he was faster, and I wanted to play with him and his friends. And I used to think he was picking on me when he would throw the ball at me faster, hit the ball at me harder, push me harder than his friends, and I would cry to my mom, and she would say, "Vanessa, if you want to play with your brother, you got to play at his pace." And today, now I thank him, right? Because he really teed me up to be successful and better than a lot of my peers at a young age. And so I went on to play travel softball in Southern California. I earned a scholarship to play at LSU, which I did for 3 years, had some success there, but opted to transfer my senior year to UL Lafayette to play for Coach Michael O'Teef, who we've heard a lot about this week. And as a former player of his, I can really attest that I learned more in 1 year about hitting with him than I probably had in all of my years combined. Coach Patrick, if she's here, gave a really cool talk yesterday on the home run mindset. And Coach Mike really epitomized that in his career. Have like a quick story on that for you guys with him. I grew up playing for a lot of coaches who rewarded result. So I'd have an at-bat, I would swing at a crappy pitch and a hitter's count, hit some little dying quail down the left field line, and I'd look across the field at my coach and they'd be clapping at me, telling me what a great job I had done. And when I transferred to UL, I was going through a lot of changes in my swing, as you can imagine, and had an at-bat, one bat in particular that I'll never forget with Coach Mike, where Ashley Brignac's on the mound, just breezing 70 plus past us, and we're striking out. And I had an at-bat where just like that, 3 pitches, swing and miss, swing and miss, swing and miss. And I look up at Coach Mike and I think, I'm gonna get that same, this is it, he's just gonna lay into me. He's running across the field at me. And when he gets to me, I realize he's actually congratulating me, fist bumping me, chest bumping me, telling me what a great job I had done. And I was like, this guy is insane. I just struck out, right? Like, what is he celebrating? But he was celebrating the process. He was celebrating the fact that, yeah, I had struck out, but I had swung at quality pitches and I had got after it, like she had said. And he knew that if I continued down that path, that good things would come, and they did. We went to the Women's College World Series that year, had a lot of success. So when I was done playing, just to kind of put this in perspective for all the baseball, especially all the MLB people in the room, I got drafted to play professionally in 2008. And that really consisted of Coach Mike calling me and saying, hey, you got drafted, congrats. They're gonna pay you to play now. It'll be $5,000. And I was like, holy shit, I'm gonna be $5,000 a month? I'm gonna be so rich? And he's like, no, annually. So that didn't seem feasible to me. So I decided to take the degree that I had earned, and I went into FinTech. I started in a low-level position. Softball, fortunately, had taught me a lot of intangibles that applied to the workplace about work ethic. And I escalated quickly in my career. I was successful for 10 years, but I woke up one day and I was unfulfilled. And I knew the thing that was missing from my life, the thing I was really passionate about, was softball. And so I made a commitment to get back into the game. And it was serendipity timing. Blast was in the process of launching into softball right around this time, and I was in the process of saying, how can I get back into softball? And our paths just happened to cross right at the right time. And sometimes I wonder how that came about, like the people at Blast, what what led them to say, yeah, we might have had this baseball solution for a few years, but we really need to go into softball and give softball this dedicated solution for this sport. And everyone at Blast is going to want me to say this because we were pioneers and forward thinking and we just saw it before everyone else did. But for me, I think it's about our softball community. I think that our softball community is used to, whether we like it or not, being overshadowed and kind of the little sister of baseball. We're used to having a smaller platform, less resources, less pay. We're tired of it, but that's the reality right now. So the softball coaches who are out there who are looking for new and innovative things were taking the Blast solution that we had and just applying it to their softball athletes, because why not? We do stuff like that all the time. Well, Blast recognized that, Blast fixed that. They brought me in, and we created a dedicated solution in what we do specifically for softball. And my presentation today is a little bit about what happens when you give little sister the platform to succeed. I kind of figured there's no better way for me to be able to do this than through graphs and analytics, since we're all geeks in this room, so you're welcome. What you're looking at right here is what we're going to refer to in Blast as action counts. You'll probably think of this as just swings. And this is across all three of our sports for 2018 to 2019. You can see some pretty tremendous growth here, 400% growth in a year, right? But my question, obviously looking at it through a softball lens, is how much of this is softball? The next chart is going to show you the exact same numbers carved out just for baseball and just for softball, again, January of 2018 to January of 2019. In January of 2018, we were taking less than 100,000 swings a month as a sport, again, just for softball. To put some context to that, our product had been out to market for less than 6 months. We had really a team of one in terms of dedicated bodies just to softball. And so we had a big challenge in front of us. But because of my background, the 10 years that I had spent in fintech, I felt like I had a pretty solid strategy in place, and it was to go to the top of the food chain first. How do we go get the key influencers, the key players, the key coaches, the key travel organizations, key colleges? How do we go get the people at the top to buy in and then let the rest fall in line? And so we spent a year doing that. We traveled, we educated, we saw success. We increased our team from 1 to 10. In the early days, fighting for those resources at Blast was difficult. We didn't have a lot of revenue to justify bringing on more bodies or improving our own softball solution. But as our community adopted and embraced Blast, those conversations internally became a lot easier. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of insecurities early on. I had come from, like I said, I had come from fintech. I was working with Fortune 500 businesses where the idea of purchasing secure payment hardware, the idea of purchasing SaaS tech stacks was not an if question. No one ever questioned if they would do these things or purchase these things. It was, who am I going to purchase it from, who's going to deliver it best, and who's going to deliver it at the most affordable price? And so I came back to the softball world and the sports world and said, after 10 years, and said, you know, the only thing I really remember about technology from 10 years ago when I was playing were stopwatches. I have like nightmares of the camcorder that our manager used when I played in college to record our at-bats behind home plate, where they would usually forget to push the stop button, and half of my at-bat was my manager's feet or the fence line. Or he'd forget to move to the other side of the umpire because I was left-handed and the body was obstructing the strike zone. So how was I supposed to go to the coaches today and say, look at the things that Blast are doing, look at this price point, this is definitely, this is something you must do? It was tough. But what I didn't realize was that in the 10 years that I had been gone, that tech had really boomed in sports. And people were starting to listen, people were starting to adopt, and people were starting to believe. And so those conversations definitely became a little bit easier. And the data supports that story. In a year, by January of 2019, we were stride for stride with our baseball brothers, doing over 1.5 million swings a month. So rapid adoption really speaks to our community. That growth continued into 2019. What you're looking at here, it's actually typo at the top. It should say softball versus softball action count trending from 2018 to 2019, July through November. So put this in perspective, guys, we're seeing 200% growth November to November, 18 to 19. This month in November will be the first month that we break 2 million actions in a month for softball. It's the first time we've ever done that. And for anyone that's wondering, that's more than baseball. I'm not competitive at all, I swear. Cool. So who's helped us get there? What you're looking at here is just a list of some of those teams and organizations that we've brought on in the last 2 years to help us achieve these types of numbers. You're going to see a lot of different types of organizations here. You're going to see combine operators like On Deck Measurements. You're going to see colleges, NAIA, Division I, and everything in between, high schools, hitting facilities, travel organizations. The cool thing about what we do at Blast is that we have a version of our solution that's applicable to everyone. Our solution's also scalable. The Bombers, for an example, which you're seeing kind of the fourth line down there, is a travel organization nationwide that has over 1,000 athletes on board with us in what we call our full solution. We have colleges that maybe have somewhere around like a 20-woman roster. We have individual hitting coaches who maybe have 5 people that they're giving lessons to, right? We also have people like Daniel over at Seton Hall, who literally when Daniel called me and wanted to make his first purchase with Blast a couple years ago, told me a really cool story about how he went and found bats, old bats in a shed that he had at the back of the field and sold them on eBay to come up with the funds just to buy a handful of sensors. Then worked his way over a couple of years to earn to fight for the funding in order to level up to our full solution. At a minimum, you need $150 to get started with us for one sensor. That's $150 to start objectifying your development process. Really, the coaches for us that are leveraging our solution to its fullest capacity all have like 3 core requirements in common. They are interested in transforming the player development process. They're doing it through objectifying their analysis process during that development, and then using that data and that information that they've collected objectively to standardize the recruiting process and help their athletes achieve their goals of playing at the next level, whatever that next level has to be. And Blast sits right in the middle of those ideals. The coaches that are really successful with us sit right in the middle of those ideals, right? My colleagues, Kyle and Jacob, did a great job yesterday running you guys extensively through plane connection and rotation, which are key assessments that we offer both on the baseball and softball side of the house. But I wanted to kind of take a step back and just from a very, very simplistic level answer the question maybe a lot of you guys have, which is what is Blast Motion? At our core, Blast Motion really consists of 3 things. It's pretty simple. We're a hardware and software tech stack where we really do 3 things. We have a motion sensor that goes on the end of a bat that collects a bunch of different data points. I'll get to that in a second. The second piece is a mobile application that you download on your phone just like any other mobile application that allows you to see the data that the sensor is capturing in real time. And the third piece, the most important piece that we do, is a cloud service called Blast Connect. Blast Connect is essentially just a website where we store that data over time and give you access to insights and analytics over time. Okay. Blast Connect is really the bread and butter of what we do. And I wanted to take a few minutes to highlight it because it's critical to everything that Daniel is about to show you guys in a few minutes. I think a lot of people know Blast as a motion sensor, but motion sensor is kind of like the egg of our chicken, if you will. Like we can't get the data without the sensor, but the sensor data is just a big, long chain of lines of data that we on the back end have to then convert into things that are super simple for our users to understand, like what your bat speed is and how you trend over time and how you can improve. And we put all of that in our Blast Connect platform, right? So storing the data there is key for us. The reason is because it gives us the ability to tell a really compelling story. And the best way for me to describe this or explain it is through an analogy. So I'm going to kind of use Daniel as my Vanna White for this. Let's just pretend for a second we wanted to know in America whether Americans across the board like Coke or Pepsi better. So I'm going to ask Daniel to help me with this survey. Do you like Coke or do you like Pepsi better?
I'm a Coke guy.
Coke guy. All right, guys, all of America likes Coke better. People would have a hard time believing that, right? It's just Daniel. It's just this one guy, survey size of 1. It'd be hard to believe. And our data set is exactly the same. The bigger it is, the longer you have it, the more powerful and the more insightful it becomes for you. So now let's imagine I go out and I ask millions of Americans across the United States over a 5-year period, who likes Coke, who likes Pepsi better? And those results tell us that 60% of America likes Coke better. If I come to you with that type of finding, you probably have more belief in it. Again, our data is exactly the same. Correlated that a little bit differently, if a player takes one swing and they have elite plane connection or rotation values, we don't say they're an elite hitter. We say prove it again and again and again and again. And we want to look at a data set through the power of Blast Connect to say this player's taken millions of swings over 5 years, and yes, they're elite in PCR. That's the kid whose swing is going to perform at the next level. That's the kid that you want. And we cannot do that without Blast Connect. So Blast Connect is as simple as, do you want to log in and see a report that shows you how many swings your players have taken? Do you want to, or it can be as complex as, do you want to log in and see a report that identifies your efficiencies in plane connection rotation and customizes the drills that we recommend an athlete does to improve whatever that inefficiency is? Okay. Okay, last thing I want to cover here is our metric set. The data that I showed you guys a few slides back has allowed Blast in general, but specifically Blast softball, to really evolve our assessments and the metrics that we offer. So I know this is kind of a lot of information to look at here. So I'm gonna, if you guys can just bear with me here and work with me left to right across the screen, and just for a second, focus on the 6 impact metrics that are on the left. Those metrics were initially the only metrics that Blast offered. And they were great, like this was like 2 years ago when I first came on with Blast. And they were great for the time, they were insightful, but we got a lot of questions from coaches, and it went something like this. Vanessa, I've got 3 players. One is an All-American, one is a steady starter for us, and one sits the bench, is never gonna touch the dirt. But when we collect their Blast data, it's all exactly the same. They've got the same bat speed. They have the same attack angle, they have the same vertical bat angle, and so on and so on and so on. So what is Blast really telling us about why one performs at such a high level and the other doesn't? And we really took that to heart. We said, okay, challenge accepted. We knew on the back end that a lot of manual work needed to be done in order to answer that question, and we needed to simplify it for our users. And that was the birth of plane connection and rotation, which again, Kyle and Jacob did a great job explaining to you guys yesterday. The thing is even when we had plane connection and rotation, even that really wasn't enough. Because the problem is, again, tale of 3 athletes, we'd have 3 players, and let's just say all of them had an on-plane efficiency of 50%. The question was, is that good? Is that bad? And the answer was just like Coach Mike said yesterday, well, it depends. What's their level of play? Are they a professional athlete? Are they in college? Are they 12? Because 50% on plane means different things for those different levels of athletes. And that was the genesis of the last column here on the right, our scoring system, which now will tell you where your player ranks for their level of play. So same 3 players, one's an NPF player or an MLB player, a professional player. Their on-plane efficiency is 50%. That honestly, guys, might put them in the 30th percentile down there, a score of 30 at the bottom of our scale or in the red. We're going to judge on a much stricter, harsher scale where we think that athlete should be from a performance level because they're a professional athlete. And that would tell them right away, okay, my on-plane efficiency is 50%, I'm a score of 30 amongst my peers, that's not very good, I definitely need to put in some work on improving that category. For the collegiate athlete, 50% on plane might put them right in the middle of the bell curve, right middle of the pack at a score of 50 or in the yellow for us. Not too bad, not too great, maybe some improvement to be done, but pretty good considering you're right in the middle of where the rest of the population is. And lastly, for that 12 and under athlete, that might be way above where we think they should be, or way above where their peers are, in fact. And so they might be in the 70th percentile, score of 70 in the green there, letting them know that, hey, amongst your competition, you do this at an elite level much better than everyone else around you. Okay? The data suggests, and all the data that we've collected both across baseball and softball, that an average athlete will be able to do one of these three things well in plane connection rotation. An above average athlete will do two well, and an elite athlete will be able to do all three well. And again, the more data that you can collect, the longer you can collect it, the more insightful that becomes for you guys. Okay? The last thing I really have here before I kick it over to Daniel, who's going to do a great job of showing you how he applies all of this information from BLAST, is just to encourage and challenge you to want to embrace technology and data. And I know that a lot of you are in this room because you already believe those things. But I tell every customer that I talk to, every player, every chance I get, every BLAST person I talk to, every BLAST user I talk to, that every single time they put a sensor on the bat and they collect a data set, they help improve our sport. It's that simple, guys. It's like a recipe. If you have a grandma, if any of you had a grandma that like just made something better, a pie or a meatball or whatever it was, just so good, imagine if she never wrote the recipe down and it never got passed on to the next generation. And you never knew why grandma's apple pie was so much better than everybody else. And you could never replicate it. Like the swings and the athleticism that we're seeing from our players today are like that. And technology like BLAST and others gives us the ability to capture that recipe and really understand, was it the combination of sugar, flour, and butter that made them great, or was it that sprinkle of cinnamon that no one put in? Like, we can figure that out in the swing. But we can't do it if we don't use the technology and objectify the process to figure out exactly what it is that makes them special, and then do everything that we can to replicate it quicker. Okay? So that's it for me. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. It's been an honor being here, and I'm going to kick it over to Daniel. Cool.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take you guys through this very sort of visual journey of first how I started with BLAST, sort of the progress from my first reporting to the process I put in place this fall. And then I'm going to take you guys through a bunch of the visuals and some of the metrics that I look at, because it's a question I get a lot. So before I get into that, though, I think there's one sort of essential question that we need to answer before we start analyzing the data, and that's what's hitting. If we don't start with that sort of very foundational question, then when we are looking at a chart or a report, we sometimes can forget what we're actually trying to improve. So if you think about the ecological dynamics, that happens during a swing and a pitch. We have a pitcher throwing a ball. We then interpret this information and then hope to make quality contact. And it's this sort of beautiful interaction between the environment and the body and the task of trying to hit something far. So inherently, there's going to be variability because that's what pitchers are trying to do, right? They're trying to mess up your timing, or trying to change speeds on you. So that means we have no choice but to also have some variability in our swing. And that, again, is going to be reflected in our reporting, and when we look at different visuals and whatnot, we have to make sure we take that into account. We're not just trying to replicate the same swing over and over again, but we're looking for this sort of optimal variation swing to swing. The second sort of essential question we have to be really good at understanding is, okay, well, what are we actually measuring? Well, with BLAST, we just measure this small piece of this giant puzzle that is hitting. We can then obviously take a little bit more subjective notes, like we can write down what setting the swing we're taking in. Was it in a live setting, or was it in flips or off a tee? And now BLAST has the capability of do that within the app. But the second thing we also have to understand is just because a hitter scores well on the sensor and on the reports and whatnot, that doesn't mean that they're a good hitter. Good hitters are adaptable creatures who can compensate for inefficiencies, and we want to make sure that we don't necessarily look to make a change until it's a problem. So for me, Blast is a problem-solving tool. Somewhere where if we are experiencing a problem on the field, I can dig a little bit deeper, and I wouldn't otherwise be able to do that if we weren't tracking and measuring. So this is where I started. So very first fall as a hitting coach at Seton Hall, we have this set up this big evaluation day where I started out sort of just with a question that I wanted to answer, and I wanted to really take the time to answer throughout the fall, and that was how come some of my worst in-game hitters test well with a sensor, and does velocity have an effect on the swing? Those are two questions that, from my past experiences with bat sensors, had really come up and had deterred me from using them. So my hypothesis was also that the two very much relate to each other. So in this very small little case study, I had 20 hitters. They each took 20 swings in front toss off of 50 miles per hour off the machine, 55, 60, 65, and then we put them on in scrimmages and games. And what we found was that when the pitch speed increased, now mind you, attack angle decreased by negative, it went down 12.9 degrees, but mind you, this is all in one day. This is hitters that are not used to velocity off the machine. So even though you'll still most likely see a decrease in attack angle, for this particular situation, we had hitters that were very much not experienced off of a machine, so they were getting beat. The second piece, I saw bat speed decrease and time to contact decrease. My conclusion was that training environment matters, and because of the training environment, the setting you're in off of 65 relative to front toss, it becomes much more challenging to replicate a high quality swing. So this is the report Tyler talked about. So put this gigantic spreadsheet together. A lot of stats. I basically had a little scoring system, marked down how hard the ball was hit, where it went, and all that kind of stuff. And I tried to pair the two together to really try to dive deeper into what's good and what's not good. But I think in hindsight now, going back and looking at this is kind of neat. It was what's the one piece I'm missing? And I definitely think it's simplicity, which is what Jeff talked about yesterday. So this is my reporting now, a lot more simple. I basically got 4 different graphs. Every single one of them has these sort of ideal ranges, and the goal with them is to entice action, right? So you look at it and you're okay, one, I understand where am I missing, and am I in the box or am I not in the box, right? So as a player, when they choose to look at a graph, it should really give them a clear visual, clear indication of what they're doing well or what they're not doing well. And then if they're not doing well, in which direction am I missing? So we're going to look a little bit closer on that first one. So here we have bat speed on the x-axis and time to contact on the y-axis. And then the coloring is speed efficiency. So you'll see, so basically what that is, it's hand speed divided by bat speed. So it's basically looking at this relationship between hand speed and bat speed to sort of classify whether a hitter is a pushy hitter or they have good bat speed relative to their bat speed or to their hand speed. So the coloring is, if it's blue, darker the blue it is, the more handsy the hitter is. The darker the orange it is, the more bat speed to have relative to their hand speed, which could potentially also pose some problems. But again, until we actually have a performance problem on the field, it's not necessarily something that we need to address. So the second graph, we have rotational acceleration, and then we have bat speed acceleration. So Anthony Chattel really helped me out with this, and I know his name's popped up a couple times because he's a very smart man. But basically what bat speed acceleration is bat speed divided by contact. So it gives us a really good measure of whether we're fast and whether we're fast over a short period of time. Right? Because that has definitely been one of my findings, is that bat speed alone doesn't necessarily play, but bat speed over a short period of time does. So it's important that we have both. Rotational acceleration, like Kyle and Jacob talked about yesterday, is a good measure of sequencing. It's a good measure of, just generally seeing how this hitter is accelerating into the zone. And then the color coding here is early connection. The third report, now we're looking a little bit more towards the swing plane. So we're looking to see if we're on plane with the body, but that's the on-plane efficiency metric. We're going to spend a lot of time explaining, showing you guys some visuals on that today, and then attack angle on the y-axis. So do we have a consistent swing plane, and do we have a consistent swing plane at good angles? Again, early connection is color coding. So again, this is my team report. So this is averages across every single swing that they've taken from first day to fall until current. The fourth one is early connection impact. So you have connection impact on the x-axis and early connection to the y-axis. Again, so the little details here I really think are important. Putting the early connection on the y-axis gives a really, really good visual of whether my bat starts too tall or bat starts too flat. So if I'm below the box, I'm connected below. If I'm above the box, I'm too connected up top. Right. So, and then connection impact basically gives you an indication whether your barrel is above or below the hands relative to your posture. Okay, so then I have that same exact report, just sorted by week. So I'm giving weekly averages. I can kind of click through it. I can see how we're progressing, if we're progressing or not. I have a very simple team progress chart and same metrics. The color coding of the titles up top is the color coding, obviously, of the graph. And then this is my individual report. So it has 2 more graphs and the same, again, 4 graphs set up as the other reports. Here, though, every swing is a data point, again, with the same color coding. I'm going to dive into the 2 extra ones because pretty interesting. So here we have attack angle bins, so just whether a swing fell within certain ranges of attack angles, and then where, so the y-axis is percentage of swings within those bins, and then the color coding is percentage of max bat speed within those bins as well. So if a hitter has, say like right here, a gray or orange, that's where most of their bat speed are. If you see the blue, that's, they're not 80% of their max bat speed. The last one here is connection and impact, vertical bat angle and spine angle. So this is given a good measure of how a hitter is adjusting to different pitch locations and whether they're staying connected up and down in the strike zone. So again, the color coding is your spine angle. So the more orange, the less body tilt, meaning the taller, and the more blue you see, the more body tilt, higher degree of body tilt, and the lower the posture. And obviously, the vertical bat angle would be on the y-axis again, just to entice action. You can pretty easily, just by looking at it, understand, okay, my bat is laying here, and then connection and impact is whether the spine angle actually follows. And lastly, we just have our individual progress. So, if we target a metric or whatnot, I can pretty easily keep tabs on whether we're making progress or not. There is one thing here I want you to pay attention to, and that's that really drastic drop in attack angle. So guess what we did on basically all of that week? Well, I destroyed them in velo, right? So we see that reflected in the data as well. And that's one thing that's incredibly important, is to understand the story behind the data, right? It's not just a data point, like something actually happened to create this dip in attack angle, and you have to make sure you have that story behind. So that's my general reporting. This is the overall process, right? Very simplified version. So take all the reports, that provides me feedback, potentially can provide the players feedback. They don't necessarily need to look at them. I have other measures to give them feedback with the data, but I don't necessarily think the first thing we need to do is shove a graph in the face of a hitter. But I look at the graphs a lot, and then obviously paired with video, have like different folders in Google Photos. Track progress that way. I usually do it like weekly, bi-weekly. A lot of manual work involved there. But what I found was really neat is you can actually add text and stuff like that into the Google Photos folders as well. And then obviously my eyes and ears talk to the players, watch them every day. I'm in the trenches with them. And then what I thought was really important, having a relatively short time frame to get to work. I wanted to make sure we had good, clear structure, so that everyone can neatly move through the cages, make sure that we sort of optimize our time, but I also wanted to make sure that there's some creativity allowed within that structure. So the way I kind of very simply explain this process, let's see here. Okay, so the first part, I know it's kind of far away, it's going to zoom in a bit. The first part of our practice, we work on our moves, we work very intentionally on our swing. Again, it depends a little bit on the individual. And then the second piece is we go into flips, and then we work on our moves, while hitting. And then the last piece, we actually work on hitting, which is a little bit more competitive than just trying to develop a swing. There it goes. Okay, so a little closer look at what the programs look like. Again, across the top, you have stuff that can be done outside the cage, little flips, heavy balls, different types of bats. Again, just stuff to really work on our moves. And then we have like some flips, full circle, can even prescribe like machine work to them. And then the competition element is that hitting piece, which is what you'll see on the right here. Basically, I just stole the CrossFit scoring system and turned it into hitting. CrossFit's idea is to quantify fitness. I was like, okay, cool, that can kind of apply to hitting. And it's a good way to provide the girls feedback, the hitters feedback, without it being, looking at a graph and being overwhelming for them. So within the app, they'll log their score, and then they get a neat little leaderboard. So we'll do that every single day, but there are different challenges. So I put the competitions together whether I want to incentivize something, or if I'm looking to replicate something that happens on the field, or looking for them to go through some sort of experience, whether that's a lot of failure or just for them to feel good. Here's an example called Need for Speed. So it's a descending rep scheme, 8, 4, 6, 2, and it switches between average and max bat speed. And then you have different options to add like an RX, which is like as prescribed or scaled, so you can set certain standards so whether they fit within. Here's another called Indy in a Truck. So it's 500 miles per hour bat speed. Every time you take a swing, subtract the bat speed all the way down to 0. Who can do it in a fewest amount of swings? So Indy in a Truck is the Indy 500 with a heavy bat. Try to really get buy-in with the names, right? So if something funny happens, someone does something stupid, something comes up in the cages, try to turn it into a competition. For example, just last week, we're doing something that has different pitches, and the drop ball and the rise ball generally are really challenging to hit. So one of the hitters goes, he's like, it's like pick your poison. I gotta sit on one or the other. That's a great competition name. So right there on the spot, we pull a whiteboard and we develop a competition. I keep hitting this thing. Here's just some other examples. Blast off, flow you, drop ball from hell, right? So again, this is a way to make practice competitive, induce failure. This is fine. It's like the meme with the dog sitting there and its eyes lighting on fire, right? It's like it's not fine because it's. All right, so took that. I wanted to make sure that they had the option to log. Just when they go through it, they get feedback enough. They don't necessarily need to log it. When they just get feedback just from doing it, getting their score, and then I bet you that they all go and look at where all their teammates scored, and then they make that decision of whether they want to log their really terrible score or not, right? And that's kind of the decision they get to make every day. But towards the end of the fall here, we have 3 weeks where we're just inside the entire time, so I want to make sure that it doesn't get monotonous. So we put together a 3-week challenge called Pirate Challenge of Death. And it looks like this. So they do a competition every day. They get a ranking, put them in separate teams. So they're a blue and gray team competing against each other, and then they also compete against each other individually. So every day you got a winner based off of where you finish, 1 through 20. And then every day, that kind of tallies up. And the goal with that is to create a practice setting that ends up looking like this. So that's the goal, because that's what, you come up clutch in a game situation, that's ideally what you would like to happen, right? Now I'm going to dig into a little bit more of a practical application of this process and what it looked like for 2 of our hitters. So what I wanted to highlight 2 very opposite hitters that both have had success in different ways. So we have Janae on the left and Bailey on the right. What I want you to notice is how each data point on Janae's side is clustered very close together, and on Bailey's side, it's completely all over the map. Janae's consistent, and Bailey's all over the place, right? So this is your on-plane efficiency and your attack angles, which tells me that Janae has a very consistent swing plane. Bailey does not have a very consistent swing plane. So then now I can look a little bit deeper to see, okay, where is this problem with Bailey? And we can see that Janae generally misses with attack angles below 5, sometimes pretty steep in the negatives. So this is the connection at impact and early connection. This is all from basically last spring. So again, my reporting has updated a little bit, but the general idea is the exact same. So again, if you look on the right here with Bailey, we can see that her data points are above the box in early connection, which means her bat is too tall. And that is also reflected in the video as well. And Janae starts much flatter. Obviously, that's something you can see with the eyes as well, but it's neat to get a data point on it. So, and that's one thing. By being really good at collecting data, you can always go back. But you can't reverse back in time and collect data. So this is really neat because I can look back to the fall of 2018 and see how things have changed. So if we're looking to replicate this process, I can actually go back and get some actual data points, see the video, and then try to replicate it if I run into the same problem with a different hitter. So here's the video. I know it's 2 different angles, but you'll get the idea. So this ball Janae hits on the left is above the catcher's head and is roped. And she'll do that a lot. And Bailey notoriously has a big, gigantic hole up in the strike zone, right? So when we talk about using BLAST as a problem-solving tool, well, this is a performance problem, right? It was hindering her performance on the field, so we can use BLAST as a tool to figure out where that adjustment needs to happen. So again, Janae, and just by using my eyes, looking at the connection metrics, you can see that Janae has a really consistent launch position. She starts pretty much in the same spot every time, and Bailey does not. So your early connection number is the interaction between your body tilt and the vertical bat angle in the beginning of the downswing. So I'm going to dig into this a little bit more. So something is happening in between beginning of the swing and contact for Bailey. You see a low on-plane efficiency. And something is also inconsistent in how she gets there. So connection metrics, what do they mean? And there's interaction between these 2 angles. And this is from the 3D swing tracer. So body tilt, if you want to calculate that out, it's 90 minus connection impact plus vertical bat angle, which obviously generally is in the negatives at contact. And then early connection is the vertical bat angle at the beginning of the downswing relative to body tilt, and connection at impact is the vertical bat angle at contact relative to the body tilt. And what that looks like is this. Again, that's a picture Anthony Chattel made. Please go follow him on Twitter. He's awesome. You'll learn a lot. So you see the red lines are even with ground, vertical, and you can see how to interplay between the angles there. So look a little bit deeper. So this is one of the graphs from the individual reports. Again, so this is a little bit later than the couple reports we looked at first. So this is from this actual fall. And here we can see that Janae has a high amount of tilt, which you can see by the color. Right, it turns blue really quickly. And she has a high barrel, which you can see by the data points being shifted over towards the left with a low connection to impact. So that means she's very low, and her barrel is tilted a little bit up this way. And Bailey is the opposite. Low amount of tilt, generally has, it was a lot worse than this, but she has generally a low barrel, and then you can see that by the data points being shifted over a little bit more to the right. So what does that actually look like? So this is early fall, and this is where I'm really starting to dig into some of the connection metrics and how to actually make changes with them. But this is what it looks like live. So 42 degree vertical bat angle, 13 degree body tilt, and you can see there's a big gap between there, and that's why the early connection is so high. And here's her going through her swing, and you see that swing plane is very inconsistent relative to that body tilt. So at impact, again, her connection impact is below 90, which means her barrel is lower than her posture, vertical bat angle is negative 21, and body tilt is 13. On plane efficiency was 47 at this point here. You also see the bat speed is pretty low. Jeff said one thing yesterday that really clicked that I'm going to try to highlight again here in this second video, but this is what it looks like full. So this is her just last week. So you can see posture's tilted over just already a little bit more. There's a little bit more in her hips. You still see that vertical bat angle, which I think is very much a swing identity thing that I didn't want to strip away from her. But you see that just because her adjustment with her posture, you see that early connection really go down there. And what also want you to notice is the bat speed picked up quite a bit. And here she is with her posture being a little bit more leaned over. She was a very, very, very challenging problem to solve. Turns out she had a lot of stuff going on medically that was really hindering some of the postural adjustments. She has pretty bad scoliosis, so she's always, hanging out in her right hip, leaned over, spine's bent in like 3 places. That wasn't really anything that we felt was important to tell me. So not until I started asking, why are you always hanging out here? It's like, oh, my spine is bent. I'm like, okay, well that potentially could be a problem. Might be able to help you out with this. So I was able to grab our head trainer, and she's one of the players. I love this kid. She's in the office 24/7, doing training exercises on the floor in her office, trying to I always make fun of her crooked back, right? Trying to get her a little bit more aligned. But we were able to talk to the head trainer, get her some exercise in the training room. I was like, stop hitting off a tee and go to the training room. The tee is easy to just put up, get some swings in. It's really hard to go in the training room. If you want to get better, that's what you need to go in there. And then we were able to sort of carry over that process from the training room and into the cage a little bit with some prep work. And it really started to clean up some things. She started getting more aware of where her body is in space. It was really neat, and her on-plane efficiency really increased. I think she's kind of a big year. She already did, but she's gonna do well this year. Okay, so here we have Janae. This has sound on it. Okay, so again, high degree of body tilt, a little bit lower vertical bat angles. See that connection and that early connection there being low, and then going through contact. Again, we can see that hands being above the posture. Again, that's not necessarily a problem until it is a problem. Right? So the main thing just wanted to fix with her, she's just wanted to make sure that she takes that really good swing plan, she takes all those really high quality swing characteristics, and just maybe gets behind the ball a little bit earlier. So a lot of that could just be done with external cueing. And this is her swing. I'm going to talk about how they did all last year, but she hits the ball the other way quite a bit. It's a very, very low time to contact, 0.12 generally, which is kind of unreal. So again, here we have that attack angle, bat speed graph. So you can see Bailey generally has really high attack angles and very much also reflected in how she performs on the field, and Janae tends to miss below. Track the progress over time, but kind of check in on them, see if we're making progress. And then this is them last year. It's a lot of us beating Butler. So that was Bailey last year. She still probably couldn't handle the pitch up here. And you can see her doing a really good job of not giving that away. So that was one thing, again, in season, was okay, we have this problem. We don't necessarily have a solution for it yet. So let's build your approach around not giving up what your weakness is. So basically, our whole goal was if you see a ball up, act like you're mad that you took it, and don't give it away. We don't want to give it away until at least game 3. And she was able to do that, especially towards the end of the year, and she really turned it on. Here with Janae, you can see just very different swing. consistent contact. Again, a little bit of power, but again, the balls are hit on the line for the most part. Okay, so again, what we did in training is I think like a lot of times with these talks, it's like, okay, well, what do you actually do about it, Daniel? Like, what we did in training, very simply, I don't like to show drills or anything like that because I think that's up to the individual coach to spend time in the cage to figure out what's going to be the best solution for this player. But what we basically put an emphasis on for Janae was you have this really close cluster of data points in terms of your swing plane. So I feel like I can challenge your pattern pretty good. So we had to focus on moving balls all the time, high velo, all that kind of stuff to kind of challenge her because I felt like she was in a place that we could do that. And then only external cueing just from knowing how she would handle looking at a graph as a person. And Bailey kind of took a little bit of the opposite approach. I felt like we needed a little bit more lower variability intentional practice where we just really honed in on a few items that we knew were important. She was really good at grasping the different concepts, and she's really good at applying it off a tee, and then we kind of started blending in those movements into increasingly challenging environments. And how did they do? Well, Janae hit 25 doubles and set the single season record, and Bailey led the conference in home runs. And you can see that both of their OPSs went up quite a bit. On base percentage went up, extra bases per hit went up. But very different seasons. Janae was pretty consistent throughout the year. Bailey was absolutely on fire the last month of the season. And again, that was after doing some swing changes like mid-year. So thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Daniel and Vanessa.
Oh.